Move on to the next topic because I've kind of made it a pet project of mine to understand the African context in the United Methodist Church, and I'm very far from being an expert on all this. I've had 2 interviews so far, hoping to do several dozen. I'm hoping to put them out over time for other people to learn from and see. But it's people over here have known it's complicated over there for a while. A few weeks ago, there was a statement put out by some African bishops saying the Africa Initiative, the Wesleyan Covenant Association, and the Global Methodist Church are responsible for trying to split the church in Africa. They are now no longer welcome to be active in these regions in Africa. Last I checked, there are 3 central conferences in Africa divided under at least 13 bishops. I was looking at this earlier today, and I'd forgotten. I've forgotten already.
But then we have far more bishops and fewer church members in the United States than they do in Africa. I will say that.
So there are more African United Methodists than there are American United Methodists. However, that's not necessarily reflected. The Africa Initiative came back with a response saying, it's not our intent to divide the church. We're just trying to circulate information and let churches be informed. And so I've been trying to talk with different people in Africa to say, okay, how do you see us? And then how do you see yourselves in the whole denominational setup? And it's way too broad for an 8-minute segment here. But I did want to focus on this article by David W. Scott, and he writes for UM News from time to time. That's him right there. I've noticed him having a very nuanced and unbiased perspective, which is nice. And he's been writing on, in particular, what it seems to me the Nigerian perspective seems outsized in comparison. And it's not that we never hear anything, but the conflicts in Nigeria sure take center stage. And a lot of the key players are in Nigeria. So another group, Africa Voices of Unity, the main guy that I've been talking to there is Nigerian. And you would think, okay, the ones against the Africa Initiative. Africa Initiative is very conservative, so Africa Voices of Unity must be very liberal, right? No, they're both very conservative, not just with human sexuality, but biblical interpretation. But there's a genuine question on their part of, do we move forward by working well with the evangelicals, splitting off? That would be Africa Initiative, WCA, GMC. Or do we do better to cooperate with the institution, which will then pass something like a Christmas covenant and let them have regional autonomy? So this article by Mr. Scott here, he's probably a doctor. He talked about this gathering in Nairobi in May where the Africa Initiative dealt with some of these tensions, but the one I really wanted to focus on was they really want to see some more bishops put in place over there. They're raising this concern that I think the Africa Voices of Unity would as well. I wanted to share this quote from.
I think is it that like us, their bishops are because General Conference hasn't met, they haven't elected bishops to so they have retiring bishops and they have bishops that are going past retirement like we've had.
Well, and they have one who died, who orchestrated the protocol. But even so, what happened in the U.S. was we weren't supposed to be able to bring in new bishops until General Conference, and the Judicial Council got involved and said, "Oh, no, we can do it here." But they didn't do that for the central conferences.
Yeah, which I agree. That seems a little.
That's weird.
Yeah.
So here's the things that Ande is the Africa Voices of Unity person that I've been talking to. He lifts up 4 things that are representative of. I don't think he says racism. I don't know that he even says neocolonialism. I should have read this before, but there are 4 things. 1, what is the total membership of UMs in the Western jurisdiction, and how many bishops do they have compared to Africa as a whole? Is there equality in the way bishops are distributed in the United Methodist Church? So we already talked about that one too. Look at the boards and agencies we have. How many Africans serve in the boards or work in those agencies? Is there equality in that distribution? And the answer is no. 3, look at the United Methodist universities and colleges. How many do we have in Africa compared with America? I think there's actually, isn't Gumbaranga where Jerry Kula is? And I want to say there's a third too. But even so, look how many are in the U.S.
13 in the U.S.
And that's just the official ones. We have money involved in a lot more. And then 4, when the WCA tells the UMC members to stop paying apportionments, who do you think that will affect? Think about the schools, hospitals, other, I don't know what he said there, people in Africa that depend on that apportionment. Is that what you call equality? I could go on. And I wish he would. You know, I think it would be really helpful to be thinking about that. But when we imagine, I think right-leaning people like to imagine we're on the side of the Africans. We agree. We share in that
I think
theology.
that next paragraph, though, is the most telling and the most accurate.
Well, I've read enough. Go ahead and say
It
it.
says, many people in America think Africa is one country. Such myopic thinking translates to how they relate with Africans. We have been treated as less human, even by the church. I went to Wesley Theological Seminary in Washington, D.C., and I can recall encounters in America where as a black person, I was treated differently. We see how our black siblings in Africa are being treated by both the far right and the far left. Where is equality in all these things?
Yeah, yeah.
And you know, I'm not as informed as I would like to be in Africa, on Africa, but yeah, we forget that it's a continent with multiple countries, not a nation on its own, and each country has its own thinking, and we forget also that, you know, the colonial powers did set up a lot of the boundaries of these countries, and they did so without regard to what were already established tribal territories. And so in some cases, you know, you had you had tribes that were divided among different territories and put into different countries. And, you know, that was the origin of the Rwanda genocide in the 90s, was this tribal conflicts and the tribalism that's, you know, still kind of undermines a lot of the thinking in society there. But you know, and I think in terms of, you know, their should they remain United Methodist? Should they go Global Methodist? Should they do their own thing? I mean, a lot of that also comes down to national laws, and are they in a country that has to recognize officially the churches that operate in that country? And so if you change your denomination, now you're no longer a legal church. You know, you see that can be a factor. And I think it is a matter of trust. You know, and lack of trust. But yeah, I mean, parts of the Christmas covenant I actually can support, because I mean, let's face it, General Conference is very United States focus.
Right, and the Christmas covenant gives regional autonomy to different parts of the United Methodist Church where they can have different doctrines to one degree or another.
Let's just go back to our last topic with the General Board of Church and Society. They're advocating on something that is only affecting, you know, the United States, and not speaking and not advocating. I mean,
they would say it affects other parts of the world, but even so, I mean, with that and the gender ideology, these are concerns that are very outsized in the Western culture. And then in Africa, one gentleman I was talking with yesterday, he said, look, it's a much bigger if you want to talk about sexual ethics, we want to talk about polygamy here. We need to figure that out. If you want to talk about threats to quality of life, we want to talk about religious persecution here. You know, we have dire poverty issues that we're still dealing with. You're talking about getting people on government health care over in North America. We're just talking about keeping people alive over here. You're talking about how different ethnicities die at slightly higher rates. Well, they say 3 to 4 times. When you look at that actual data, actual numbers, it's not the genocide that you might be led to believe. It's not that we should be indifferent about it, but we should be interested in all those other causal factors that are involved in maternal mortality rates, you know, and how they correspond with culture and race. But we've already moved on since that topic. When we're talking about African concerns, they're not the same as Western concerns. And so do we split off and allow people to focus on their own concerns, or do we seek the same mind that was in Christ Jesus?
Yeah, and that's my point was just trying to be, is that a general agency of the church is focused on a topic for the United States and not for the general church.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that seems to be that's our inherent structure from the beginning, that we're focused on the United States, and we do tend to neglect not just Africa, but Europe and the Philippines, the other parts of the United Methodist Church. And although, you know, I would like to see us have more of a one mind approach that an equality approach where all parts of the world are somehow
Yeah, how do we
seen.
how do we imagine that we're following the Bible
Yeah.
if we allow for regional and ethnic separation within the
Mm-hmm.
church? That just seems to be
Yeah.
such a clear, and it's not like we're a pure and perfect
Yeah,
church right
no.
now, but it seems to be moving in
Yeah.
the wrong direction if we allow for that regional separation. But it's for the sake of short-term political convenience.
Yeah,
and just get in our way, and that's just short-sighted and selfish. And but I mean, to find Africans also being sympathetic with it just is a statement on how distasteful we have become. And this gentleman I spoke with yesterday, I said, "Is neocolonialism a real thing happening over there? Is that a concern?" And he said, "Not really. You know, if you want to talk about colonialism, let's talk about rape and gunpowder. And but if you're talking about just hostile ideology, look at ideology that is not already in Africa that is being brought in from the West." And then he pointed me to this article that I've got on my screen here. Bishop dedicates reconciling church in Kenya. For many people, this is indicative of neocolonialism. One guy called, well, I'm not going to say what he called it, but this is evidence of Western intervention in African culture. But right-leaning caucus groups, which got all the attention from the bishops, if they're facilitating a conversation on separating, is that neocolonialism or something else? And so I don't know what else. I will have an informed position on this maybe next week, but I doubt it.